Hello everyone. As you know, the situation is a little bit tensed. It is an extraordinary situation, so we are coming out with some extraordinary measures as well, so that in spite of our safety measures, so we can continue with our classes and all, so that our students can be prepared for the examinations and their syllabus gets complete within the specific time limit. So today I'm here to discuss with you a topic which is covered in sixth semester syllabus, that is about Gandhi's concept of ideal state. Okay, that is how Mahatma Gandhi thought what should be the state and how it should operate and how it should accommodate people's interest in it, and what is the ideal form. That is, to some extent he may have realized that it may not be possible for everyone, for every nation to attain this, but at the same time, if we behave in a particular way, or if we construct our society and our political and economic structure in a particular way, so then somehow we may reach it. Okay, let's begin with the topic. Okay, so when we come to the concept, we find that Gandhi's concept of ideal state, we have to first start with the thing that Mahatma Gandhi never believed or never accepted the modern form of state, and he said that this modern state is based on violence, because this modern state often use compulsion. Okay, and any state which use compulsion on its own people cannot be a perfect kind of state. So he was just opposed to modern form of state, and he said that every state must be based on consent of the people. That is, people must voluntarily come and cooperate with the state system. So, but according to his analysis, modern state did not satisfy that parameter. So he was quite opposed to modern industrial state. And one more reasons for which he opposed actually this modern form of state is it hinders initiative and self-help. That is, modern state, according to Mahatma Gandhi, do not allow or do not encourage people to come up and give their contribution. Rather, it is the state that dictates what should be done, and this should not actually occur according to him. So any state to him, that's why a state which actually do not encourage human initiative, a state will actually encourage violence and also use compulsion on its people, is like a machine. That's why he calls the state as soulless. That is, state is soulless machines, and according to him, this soul can only exist when these elements of state are actually altered, or the situation under which the modern state system is prevailing needs to be altered. So while discussing this topic, I will suggest our students to go through Mahatma Gandhi's celebrated work, that is Hind Swaraj. Hind Swaraj, there he discusses all these things in detail and how a Swaraj can be built. His perfect state is often termed by him as Ramraj. Ramraj. But now this process of reaching to that Ramraj is not that very much simple. We have to restructure our society, and we have to restructure our entire polity and economic system, whereby we can in the long run may think of reaching to the concept of Ramraj. I will explain that in later part of my discussion. So he said that our ultimate target should be building a Ramraj, and that Ramraj can be reached only through the way of Swaraj. Swaraj, which he equates as self-rule. Okay, so our purpose is to see how Gandhi actually suggests and what measures or what actually he suggests in order to create Swaraj, or in order to ultimately reach to self-rule. Now he says regarding the concept of modern state, how actually modern state actually behaves. Now look at this. He says, the quotation is taken from Richard Fox, Gandhi Utopia Experiment with Culture. The book is entitled as Gandhi Utopia Experiment with Culture. So written by Richard Fox. We can also refer to that as well. And there he says, I look upon an increase in the power of the state with greatest fear, because although apparently doing good by minimizing exploitation, it does great harm to the mankind by destroying individuality, which lies at the root of all progress. That is, he says that in order to attain progress, in order to attain our development, the root is that human effort should be encouraged. But after his research, he finds that the modern state, the way it behaves like a machine, the way it behaves like a soulless mechanical object, so it ultimately tries to dictate terms on the people. That he says, that's why I look upon the increase in the power of the state with greatest fear, because increase in the power, according to him, leads to doing good by minimizing exploitation. It does great harm to mankind by destroying individuality. So though it results in minimizing exploitation, but at the same time it ultimately results in a situation where individuals start depending on the state. So when individuals start depending too much on the state, they ultimately end up reducing the human effort. So suppose, for example, in India at present, during the UPA government, when they introduced the concept of Food Security Act, so it is a good effort so far as India being a welfare state is concerned. But what happens that when the food security is provided, then people at that level do not need to think of their food. They are very much assured, and they are very much in a position of security that ultimately the state will come to rescue them, and they will not be bothered about shortage of food. So now what happens that as a result, many people will now leave their work. Many people will now start depending on the state, mostly the small farmers who are otherwise could have used their effort, but now they start depending on the people, and people will not now actually try to change their actual situation. So it is good that state comes to rescue its own people, but it has the other side as well. When the people start depending on the state itself, and the dependence reach too much, so ultimately it results to a situation where individuality gets hampered. And he says that individuality is the essential. That is, every individual should know his or her credentials, her capabilities. Once we understand our capabilities, and then we start to developing it, and in the long run, when everybody in the society understand their capacity and try to contribute to the social well-being, ultimately in that process, the individual will also prosper, and the state will also prosper, because it actually leads to innovation. And once individual, they stop thinking, they stop developing themselves, once individuality is discouraged, then there might not be innovation, and without innovation no civilization can actually progress. So he says that state represents violence in a concentrated and organized form. So that is important. He says that he views modern state as a body which represent organized violence. Organized violence. Organized, that means a complex whole of a system, or a complex whole composed of many units, and state is something very much organized. It has its police, it has its army, it has its bureaucratic mechanisms. So all these things, all this So all these institutions actually help the state to carry on those violence, and actually with this, suppose for example, with this bureaucratic machinery, state reaches even to the last man or even to the last people. So state's assertion on individuals and individuality is omnipotent, and it's again omnipresent. So that means that a modern state is quite overpowered, and this overpowered state actually results in a situation where influences the life of every individual, and it may ultimately result in a situation where individuals start too much depending on the state and individual efforts are diminished. So that's why Gandhi was quite opposed to this kind of overpowered or mechanical state. Rather, he suggests that this notion of mechanical state needs to be replaced by a state which represents aspirations of the people, even to the last, who is standing in the last position, or the people looking at people at the grassroots level. So what he suggests, what we should do, he suggests that this can be done with the help of what we call decentralization. Decentralization. So we are quite aware of the idea of decentralization, and modern times we view panchayats as the decentralized body in case of so far as India is concerned. Now decentralization, what Gandhi suggested, was of two kinds. There are basically two ways by which decentralization can be done, and one is political decentralization. And the other is economic decentralization. Economic decentralization. So in this two way, decentralization can be done, and this concept of this interpretation of Gandhi's idea on decentralization is actually taken from a book written by Bhigu Parekh. Bhigu Parekh, and the name is Gandhi, Political Philosophy, a Critical Examination. The book's name is Gandhi's Political Philosophy, Gandhi's Political Philosophy, a Critical Examination. So it is there in the slide, you can see this, Bhigu Parekh, Gandhi's Political Philosophy, a Critical Examination. You can refer to this book as well. In space number 110 onwards, you will see the idea that Gandhi has given on how the system needs to be actually decentralized. So for the sake of our discussion, we will first focus on how political decentralization will actually take place. So now let us discuss about political decentralization. So from a common perception, a common understanding of the thing, we know about the idea of decentralization, and common people, though those who are not in political science as well, they also understand how the decentralization has taken place over the years. But you see, so Gandhi asked for non-state polity, that is political decentralization, where people will be taking part in the decision making process. And he says that the present state has a top-down approach. And with this top-down approach, decentralization is not possible. Rather, the discourse needs to be changed, and a bottom-up approach should be taken or should be adopted. That is, his political decentralization talks about a bottom-up approach. A bottom-up approach, that is, power will flow from bottom to top. What happens in the present modern state system is that power flows from top to bottom. This very idea of power sharing or power devolution needs to be changed, and that he discusses in his idea of, that is, political decentralization. Now, how this political decentralization can be done? Ideally, he suggests that what we should do, we should adopt a system that is enlightened anarchy. Enlightened anarchy. So there may be confusion regarding this very idea of enlightened anarchy. So enlightened, that is one who has access to the ultimate truth, one who can make difference between good and bad, and then can define what is right and what is wrong. That person, if we personify this, this is a person who is actually very much enlightened, who knows how to differentiate between facts and fictions, and who knows how to differentiate between fact and realities, facts and fictional things. Now, anarchy. Anarchy, on the other hand, suggests, though theoretically do not suggest lawlessness, but from a common perception, we may mean, in a very lay meaning actually, we may mean it as to be a system where there is non-prevalence of law. That is some form of irregularities that exist. So enlightenment and irregularities or lawlessness, that actually do not go together. But now what he suggests actually, Gandhi suggested where socially and morally responsible men and women will not harm one another and do need any polity. Actually they should be do not need any polity. That is it is an enlightened anarchy is an imaginary position where he says that if we concentrate on building up men and women in a way that they actually become very much responsible, and when everybody is responsible, so there is no law is required to control them, or there is no repressive authority is required to contain them and to ask them to behave in a particular way. Ideally, he believed an enlightened anarchy will replace the modern state system and create a condition where everybody will work for the fellow individual and for himself or herself as well. But now, he himself knew that this kind of enlightened anarchy is practically not possible. As we all know, Gandhi was not a philosopher, rather he was a practical politician. His political ideas are so sound that and relevant, and that's why at modern times we follow the ideas of Gandhi, and his ideas or his political actions in course of time took the became a philosophical foundation for us to refer. Now what he suggests in place of that, he suggests an ordered anarchy. Ordered anarchy. As we all know from our common experiences that everybody in our society is not super responsible. So there are some people who are responsible, and there might be some people who are not ready to take responsibilities. So now some form of order is required. So Gandhi said that, Gandhi opted for ordered anarchy, that is citizens here enjoy maximum freedom consistent with minimum necessary order. That is, what is this ordered anarchy? Here two things will exist. One is maximum freedom plus minimum order. That is, state will give maximum freedom, or state will ensure, or the political system will ensure a situation where people will find scope for maximum freedom, but the idea of maximum freedom has its own limitations, because if everybody wants to enjoy maximum freedom, we will ultimately destroy the similar freedom of others. What negative liberalism has some problem with that. That is, maximum freedom need to be ordered. There must be somewhere some form of limitation or some form of intervention is required in order to keep people within the limits of their freedom. Okay. So now this kind of ordered anarchy is very much essential. So now what is that ordered anarchy? Our next concern is that what is the ordered anarchy, and there are three things. Ordered anarchy means non-violent state through village republic. Then it comes Swaraj and ultimately Ramraj. These three things are not separate, but actually one leads to the other. Number one is that a non-violent state through village republic. Number one, it is a village republic. That is, from our general knowledge, we know that India is a village-based country. So any form of political system that we adopt must concentrate on the villages. Villages can't be left behind, and India can't progress leaving its own villages, the root of its own development, living untouched, and we just cannot move on with urban centers. Just development of urban centers is not sufficient. Rather, how can we adopt the bottom-up approach? Is that with the help of adopting the system of village republic. Now, how to build a village republic? That is another concern we have to look into. Now, village republic, a non-violent state composed of self-governing or self-sufficient village community based on panchayat. Village republic, he called this village republic as panchayats. Panchayats. We all are quite aware of this. That is in Indian Constitution. Indian Constitution at present in its Article 40, which is under Part 4 of Indian Constitution, that discusses about directive principles of state policy. That is Article 40 included in Part 4 and the section directive principles of state policy. In that Article 40, it says that India should work or should create its villages in such a way that every village work as units of self-government. And what is that unit we will call it? These units will call it a panchayat. This is panchayat is the unit of self-government. That is, we will have to construct more and more panchayats, and these panchayats will act like a unit of self-government, and when all the units of self-government come together, then all the people will have chance to participate in the decision-making process. Now, as we all know, panchayat is very familiar. The word panchayat is very much familiar to us. It is a body of 5 persons. This is the panch. It is a body of 5 persons. These are elected. Okay. These elected 5 persons, who elect them? According to Gandhi, this is the people, all the people between age group of 18 to 50. 18 to 50 years of age will be the voters, irrespective of their differences of caste, color, gender. Everybody will vote if they are in between the age of 18 to 50, and they will elect 5%, a body of 5%. This body is known as panchayats. Now, what they are supposed to do? What this panchayat is supposed to do? This panchayat is supposed to have legislative, executive, and judicial power. That is, they will act like the government. Government has 3 organs. I will write in short: executive, legislature, and judiciary. Executive, legislature, and judiciary. So these 3 are the basic function a modern state actually performs, or these are known as organs of government. And we know there are 3 organs of government. So now, these panchayats are in themselves the government. Just mind it, panchayats are in themselves the government, and they are voted by the people of the grassroots level, and they elect a body of population, body of people, numerically 5, and they will have their executive power, legislative power, judicial power, and they will cater to the local interest. They will give their best, and these persons, these voters and this elected body will know their local problems. So at local level, these problems can be solved. Okay. Now he says that panchayat will have legislative, executive, and judicial power, and will rely on its own moral authority and pressure of public opinion. What is more important here is that these panchayats are not supposed to behave like elected dictators. Rather, they are supposed to work under the pressure of public opinion. That is, people are the ultimate centers of power. Now, how the structure needs to be organized? Gandhi says that this can be organized on the basis of an expanding circle, a circle of power that will keep on expanding. Okay, now how this expanding circle actually takes place. At the bottom, there will be these village panchayats actually at the bottom. Now there will be many village panchayats which would be grouped into talukas. Villages will be grouped into talukas. At modern times we call them, that is, Anchalik Panchayat, as suggested by 1957 Balwant Rai Mehta committee, three-tier structure that was suggested, and after in the post-independent period, Gandhi actually had this idea previously, and the way he actually wanted to India attain Swaraj. So he says that talukas or Anchalik Panchayats, the next level will be the districts. And then it will lead to the provinces. That is, if you can see, it is an approach which we call a bottom-up approach. Here the village level is the core of power, and they supply power to the upper level, that is we call talukas, and talukas supply power to district level, and then district supply power to the provinces. That is, the discourse change, power discourse will be changed here. Now each province will have its own constitution. That means every province will have its own constitution. Quite a system like modern times we have a proper federal structure. If there is proper federal structure, Gandhi actually suggested these things, but at the bottom level it is very much decentralized. Okay, it's a kind of expanding circle. The circle keeps on expanding. Okay, it moves its horizon everywhere. Now, such decentralized policy, what are the advantages of such decentralization? When the issue is that when people are participating at the village level, they are making their own decision, they are addressing their own issues. Now once people themselves participate in the governing process or the ruling process or the decision making process, they will think that this is their political system, and they will actively involve, and they will be politically educated, and everybody will become responsible, as this system will help them to be responsible. Okay, now what happens that when everybody is responsible, when everybody is behaving in a way they should behave, then we will not need any kind of police or all those structures that according to Gandhi results in state oppression like police or bureaucracy. So these are the devices by which state actually asserts its presence on every individual. So these things will no more be required, as people will themselves contribute to the ruling process. People will themselves be very much responsible. They will not break the law, so that law enforcing authorities will not be required. Where the bureaucracy will not be required, because here the people will work for themselves. So actually the idea of bureaucracy was actually very categorically discussed in theories of public administration, and it is Max Weber who came up with the classical approach how an ideal bureaucracy should be. And according to that idea of Max Weber, actually the modern types of bureaucracy are constructed, which actually when we go to the offices and we see the system, though it operates, but Gandhi was quite against this kind of bureaucratic machinery. Actually, he wanted people to be so much responsible so that file maintenance is not required, so that once we don't have bureaucracy, so we actually end up avoiding the problems that is bureaucracy is associated. So now this is he actually wanted. So basically Gandhi's idea was on how we can construct a political decentralized system. A repressive state can only be replaced if, in place of those few people, those technically we call them political elites, in place of political elites, if the power comes from the people themselves, or people are the ultimate repositories of power, then the state system will result in a situation where we will not require any form of oppressing mechanisms. Okay, state will no more be behaving like a machine or a soulless apparatus. Okay, the core is that we have to construct village panchayats, and this panchayat should be given powers, and these panchayats will help people or will bring people in the decision making process, and people will contribute, and ultimately they will become more responsible, and it will also make way for innovation. Now the related idea, his idea of political decentralization is incomplete if we don't refer to how he actually viewed economic decentralization, because political decentralization cannot be realized without doing proper economic decentralization. So now let us discuss the topic economic decentralization. The core idea behind economic decentralization is mentioned here. You can also see these points. That is, he was a critic of capitalism as it leads to economic concentration. He wanted eradication of exploitation of men by men. Economic decentralization means include the following things. Now, what he said that he was very much critical about the system of capitalism. As we all know, here he views he presents himself as a Marxist thinker. Now, as we know, capitalism has its own problem, and in India, what actually we saw during the time of British, that was nothing but a capitalist practice of colonizing. How to colonize more and more properties throughout the world, how to take control over the resources and raw materials and produce their own development. Lenin has his own idea of imperialism. That is, imperialism he called as the highest phase of capitalism. So capitalism in the long run results in imperialism, and imperialism we all know, both colonialism and imperialism, this results in subjugation of humans by humans. So any system, and again, why actually this subjugation is becomes the ultimate result in capitalism, because capitalist system is actually based on competition. Okay, when there is too much competition, and we know that in a competition everybody do not come up as victorious. There are only few people who are the owner in the perfect competitive market system. The people or the entrepreneurs or the capitalists, to be proper, will be gainful who have more capital, because it will be a competition between capital versus capital, and one who has more capital and know how the capital needs to be used, better knowledge of market, that product will dominate over others, and in course of time it will throw them out of market. So the entire Marxist discourse says that capitalism has its own root of destruction. That is, roots of destruction of capitalism is lied within the capitalism itself, the way capitalism actually operates. So now it needs, in one word, he says that capitalism leads to economic concentration. So we also see that at modern time, when there is competition, ultimately it will lead to concentration. We can take the example of Reliance Jio, for example. Once Jio comes, it is better, other will compete with Jio and all these things. But then what happens that once a particular country or particular company is gaining much of the market, it is gradually throwing others out of the market as well. So though capitalism at the beginning gives choice to the consumer, but in the long run it ultimately goes to deprive, and it ultimately controls over market, and again behaves like a monopolistic business firm. Now what happens that in case of Geo, now it resulted somehow we view, or people view that the downfall of BSNL is quite related how actually Geo actually controlled over the market system. So there are problems with capitalism itself. Now he wanted to eradicate this system of exploitation. He viewed the system of capitalism equivalent to exploitation, and this whole system needs to be eradicated. This whole system needs to be cancelled, needs to be altered or transformed. And how this transformation can take place? The idea is, that is again, economic decentralization. Once we decentralize the economy and this capitalist system, then only we can actually have a proper kind of economic orientation for a country like India. Now what he suggests? Now he suggests number one, cottage industries or small scale industries. Cottage or small scale industries. That is household production. As we know, that we already know that he talks about political decentralization. Now what the people are supposed to do? How to decentralize? Economic power must come to the grassroots level, and for a country like India where there is a lack of capital, so huge capital and investment we cannot even imagine according to Gandhi. So in place of that, if we use our small capitals or small saving that we have for production purposes, and every household become a unit of production, then ultimately it will contribute to the economic prosperity of the people themselves. Okay, one example he suggests how this household industries or small or cottage industries would work, and what sort of product it will deal in, like for example khadi, which present day our Prime Minister also talks about. That is, every household must actually try and produce khadi, and it is not any gender specific. Both men and women can actually work for this kind of production. Now, what it actually result? It actually results that everybody in our society will be earning, and once we earn, we actually start believing self-confidence. We now have the willingness to contribute to the state system as well. Now it is not disadvantageous for the state itself. When people are prospering at a very rapid rate and they actually go for production, it ultimately results in a self-reliant state system. Okay. Now, regarding when he said that he wanted a system of village republic with every household working as units of self-government and producing their own requirements. Now the question arises whether he is opposed to big industries, whether Gandhi is opposed to heavy industries. So not basically. Gandhi was not opposed to heavy industries, but what he opposed is that he opposed factory production under private ownership. He opposed factory production under private ownership. If ownership of production is in a private hands, then what it results? It results again that economic concentration. So he wanted to alter this situation. Now how can we alter that situation? One, he suggested building up small economic units. Every household become small economic units and they will produce at their household level. And then he also realized that if a modern state has to prosper, like India with a huge population, by the time we got independence we had a 33 crore population. Now if we want to go along with this population, we need large scale production. But the problem is we need large scale production, and at the same time Gandhi opposed to factory production as well. Here he comes up with an innovative idea, that is the idea of trusteeship. Trusteeship, that is building up a trust. Okay. Now, what is that? He allows, under this idea of trusteeship, Gandhi actually allows large scale production, but here he wants, that is the capitalist, to step down, and he wants every capitalist to actually, I will read it for you. He introduced the theory of trusteeship. The theme of trusteeship rests on the belief that capitalist and landlord should transfer the accumulated wealth into a trust for common use of the society. That is, he wanted the capitalist and the landlords to give up their riches and actually come under a trust. Actually, this idea looks quite superfluous or quite like unrealizable, but then after independence, there was a movement, like after even Gandhi's death, Bhudan movement was there in India, where these landlords and many capitalists came and they donated their lands to be distributed among the poor farmers. So this can be possible, but it requires extraordinary situation to actually come and exist. Anyways, he wanted the capitalists to withdraw from production. Rather, he wanted them to come under a trust and produce collectively for the people at large. Now, how this can be done? How this capitalist will come, and what will be the role of the people? So, under this trusteeship, where he asks the capitalist to sacrifice their riches and come under a trust, he says he now asks the people to adopt two things. Okay, one is non-possession, another is bread labor. One is non-possession, another is bread labor. Okay, these two things he suggested, his innovative ideas. Okay, now I will again read it for you. That is, in this connection, non-possession and bread labor were the two other features of his economic theory. Non-possession, by the word itself, it is quite visible, that is not possessing more than you actually require. Now, in this connection, he says, non-possession meant not having food or anything beyond immediate needs. That is, what is your immediate need? You should only hold that, whether it is food, whether it is private property. It should not be going beyond your immediate need, because sometimes it happens that we keep on storing things, but we don't know where to stop. So ultimately capital accumulation takes place and this capital remains unused. So Gandhi actually wanted, by his idea of non-possession, Gandhi actually wanted to keep the economic resources in the market itself so that it can be used, and once resources are used, it generates more resources, and once they are unused, it will be unused forever. So now, whatever you don't need, what is your not immediate need, you should avoid storing those things. Non-possession meant not having food or anything beyond immediate needs, and bread labor means every man should labor with his body for his food and clothing. That is, everybody should work for food and clothes. Here food and cloth means basic requirements. Basic requirements of life. That is, what is your basic requirement? For that you should not depend on others. Rather, you should come up, you should produce, you should work hard, and you should produce your own requirements. So this way it can be done. So Gandhi is not, don't believe that Gandhi is quite opposed to large scale industries, but rather he suggested a large scale industries in the form of trust, and small scale industries should focus on the very idea of bread labor. Everybody, in fact everybody should go for the idea of bread labor, produce their own requirement, and everybody in society also follow the idea of non-possession, that is not having anything beyond requirement. Bread labor, again I am telling you, bread labor suggest produce your own requirement, whether it is food, whether it is clothes, whether it is other basic requirements, you should produce its own, and you should not depend for this on the state itself. So now once we do it, what is the result? Once we have done these things, the result is Swaraj. Once we have attained economic and political decentralization, we will move one step ahead, what we call self-rule. Self-rule. That is, self-rule is the true democracy. He equates self-rule with true democracy. Self-rule is equated with true democracy because to him, democracy is not just a form of government, rather it is a way of life. Okay. This very idea, so far we have discussed the idea of economic and political decentralization. One thing you have to note that he is not focusing on institutional democracy, rather he is focusing on people's democracy. He wants the idea of democracy to be inculcated in the life of the people, and it should reflect in their behavior. Okay. So that's why he calls for a democracy, that is as a way of life, and when we practice democracy as a way of life to Gandhi, it is the true way, that is true democracy. Every person in society, now how he reads, he says that, thus the crux of his economic idea is that every person in society should lead a simple life and limit himself to the basic necessities of life. Everybody should work with his own body to fulfill the needs of economic needs, and the economic power should be decentralized so as to become a means of greatest welfare of the people. Now once we have done that, once political and economic decentralization is done, now next step is, that is the idea of self-rule. Now how he says, by Swaraj, Gandhi meant self-rule or true democracy. He insisted that only a polity based upon the principle of village communities was true democracy. Democracy was based on the recognition of fundamental facts of men are fully capable of regulating personal and common affairs and are source of all political power. True democracy means organizing the polity in such a manner that people remain in full charge of things. So when people produce their requirement, when people take part in decision making, when people are directly involved in the governing process, then they are one step closer to what we call Swaraj. And once everybody inculcates this behavior, ultimately the ideal state comes to be generated, and he termed the ideal state as Ramraj. Ramrajya or Ramraj, whatever you say. So Ramraj's idea is not anything superfluous or anything fictional, rather it's a solid argument that, or it's a very much argumentative presentation as presented by Gandhi, and he says that political and economic Swaraj will ultimately result in Ramraj. Here the Ramraj is a symbolic like by Ramraj it suggests a state system where every people is taking responsibilities, where every people is actually taking part in the ruling process, and there is no exploitation of man by man, and society based on love, goodwill, and moral character of all the members. So once we can have this kind of system, we will have Ramraj. So this is the whole idea of his, wait a minute, this is the whole idea of his ideal state. Presented in a very limited way. You may have further readings, whatever study materials will be provided to you. The ideal, the word, mind the very word ideal, because Gandhi himself know the thing that this is ideal, this is imaginary, and there are some practical problems while creating this ideal state. Okay, and from our common experience, we know that it is practically a little bit problematic to implement the entire idea of what Gandhi actually presented before us. Because modern state, it can be possible in a smaller state compared to India with a large population and a huge size and with all the diversities. Sometimes it becomes difficult to implement. However, we just cannot actually avoid what Gandhi has thought. And actually we have not avoided it. And we have created Panchayat Raj system in India, thereby, that is our 73rd constitutional amendment, we have given it a constitutional character, and we have tried to bring democracy even to the grassroots level. But the fact is that a long way to go, and we will have to work on it for more time and make some more efforts so that democracy reaches even to the grassroots level, so that we can call our country as a Ramraj. Okay, thank you so much. We will be stay connecting.